What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another TFA Throwdown. I've got the man Kevin Steele battling with me today, and we are going over two highly drafted running backs in the first round of your fantasy drafts for 2021. That is Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry going at the 105 in PPR ADP, and Nick Chubb not far behind him at the 109 in ADP. Kev, you are the Nick Chubb stan in this battle. I'll let you have the floor first. Tell me something good about Nick Chubb.
I absolutely love Nick Chubb. I mean, I love the offense that he's on this year. I love the situation that he's in. The only really downfall you can bring up about him is that Kareem Hunt's in the backfield, but he's clearly led the backfield whenever he has been healthy. If you look at him last year, he's also been ultra efficient. I mean, in 2020, he only played in 12 games. He got hurt in that Dallas game, but he still rushed for almost 1,100 yards, had 150 receiving yards, 17.3 fantasy points per game, which was seventh among all running backs, 12 total touchdowns. The biggest question mark, again, and it's going to be the biggest question mark for both these guys, is pass catching work. Neither one of them are really heavily utilized in the passing game. He only had 18 targets, about 1.5 per game. He did have a game at the end of the year where I think he had 5 targets and 5 receptions, and he started to be utilized a little bit more as a pass catcher. But the dude is ultra efficient. 78 evaded tackles, which was 6th among all running backs. Now, obviously, the case can be made for the same thing for your guy, Derrick Henry. My thing is that I think this offense is still ascending, right? This offensive line is one of the best top 5 units in the league, and there's no debating that. The offensive line actually got better. I think this offense with Odell Beckham can be even better in 2021, and they didn't really do anything outside of that. And so he's definitely going to be the guy. I think he gets more involved as a pass catcher because, like, people talk about Kareem Hunt, but Kareem Hunt, whenever he took over the role and had the role to his back to himself, wasn't great last year. I mean, he was okay, but he is definitely much more the 1B. But I just think we see Nick Chubb explode this year and put up a Derrick Henry-like season. Now, the issue is pass catching work. He doesn't offer really a whole lot there. I think if something were to happen to Kareem Hunt, you could see him go up, or in next year that's going to go away. But we're not talking about that, so it doesn't matter. The question is how much more volume is he going to get? Because if you looked at him last year in terms of his overall touches, he had 190 carries. He averaged about 16 carries per game, about 17.5 touches per game, if you include the pass catching work. And so while I get that Derrick Henry is kind of the only show in town, my argument against him is quite simply the same thing I've always said, is I think this offense is going to take a step back this year. I don't think it's going to be nearly as efficient as it has been the last 2 years. And so I think that's going to affect him in terms of the rushing yards. I think it's going to affect him in terms of the touchdown upside that he brings. And I think you could see him because if the Titans start playing for much more negative game script, Derrick Henry's off the field. Like he's not going to be stepping a foot on that field. And so that's the problem I have. This defense that they have in Tennessee is going to be terrible. And if that efficiency drops that we've seen from this offense, that's going to be a problem for him. And so I just think overall, in terms of just an overall offense, in terms of game situation, because they're both run heavy offenses, I think Nick Chubb has that advantage over him. And that's why I like him. They're very similar in terms of what they do, what they bring to the table and everything. However, I just think the offense for Nick Chubb is just better.
Yeah, no, you hit a lot of good points there. I think the one thing I'll push back on is when Nick Chubb was a second-round pick in 2020, he was the perfect guy, right? He is Derrick Henry light, and so if you could get him at a round later on your team, it was perfect. But here's the problem. They're both going in the first round, so you have to make your decision. And if I'm going to take a player that is not going to get pass-catching work, I'm going to take the volume, and the volume sits here with Derrick Henry, and that's the biggest crux of this argument is who's going to get the better volume all the way around, because they're both going to be 30 to 40 targets. 40 targets might be pushing it for both of them, probably more like 30. So we're talking about just carries on the ground and touchdowns, right? And who has done better historically on that? Derrick Henry absolutely has on the ground 115 yards per game. Nick Chubb is down there at 91 down there. That's still obviously very, very good. But we're talking about a difference of 25 yards per game. And then the touchdowns. Derrick Henry averages 1 touchdown per game over the past 2 seasons, where Nick Chubb is basically not quite at a touchdown every game and a half, but very close to a touchdown every game and a half. So talking about a better touchdown rate for Derrick Henry and the volume. So going to your point of, hey, what the situation has changed. Is this going to get worse? Or the Titans going to take a step back? My argument is no, because you bring in a guy like Julio Jones, you upgrade from Corey Davis to Julio Jones, you can't say that they're going to get less efficient, right? People worry that Arthur Smith is no longer the OC. Are they still going to run it? They hire internally. They bring in up the tight ends coach to OC, Todd Downing. I think they know what this offense is. It was 11-5 last year. It was 4th in points per game. They know they worked through Derrick Henry. Todd Downing was a part of that offense the last couple of years. He is not going to change that offense too much. It runs through Derrick Henry. And the point you said about the backfield, we're talking about Jeremy McNichols, Darrington Evans, who's hurt right now. Like nobody, he's getting 80% of the work that he got last year. He's still keeping that same percent of carries in 80%. Whereas on the flip side, Nick Chubb is splitting a little bit more of a larger share with Kareem Hunt. And so honestly, you just have to look at, I think, the volume of what this comes back. Can Derrick Henry take a slight step back and maybe touchdowns? Maybe they're throwing a couple more red zone looks to A.J. Brown and Julio, doing a couple more things in the pass game, sure, but I definitely think the efficiency in the rushing game will work because let's face it, for stacked boxes, Derrick Henry faced the most stacked boxes on a per carry rate. He was still a top 12 back in stacked boxes. So we're talking about this guy. Obviously, they're all focused on stopping Derrick Henry. Now you have Julio Jones opposite of A.J. Brown. That's definitely going to help out in that situation. So I think you see even better than a 5.1 yards per carry. Probably jumps up, maybe 5.5, 5.4, something like that. So I just think that the addition of Julio Jones doesn't hurt Derrick Henry as much as people think. And I think just the volume is king. He's going to see probably 30 to 40 to 50 more carries than Nick Chubb just based on their situations.
So this would be the one thing that I would push back on a little bit is, well, one, Derrick Henry's never had 20 receptions in a season. He had 19, 18, and 15. So he's never been a pass catcher, and he's never going to be a pass catcher. But if you look at Nick Chubb has had opportunities and has had far more. I mean, in terms of his high would be 36 that he had in 2019 when he played a full 16 games. That season, he rushed for 1,500 yards, 36 receptions, 278 receiving yards. But he did only have 8 touchdowns, 15.9 fantasy points per game. So last year, obviously, he took a bigger step forward than he had there. So I do think there's actually a little bit higher ceiling in terms of pass catching work. And if something were to happen to Kareem Hunt, well, we could be talking about a guy who catches 50 passes. Nick Chubb is a capable pass catcher. They just haven't utilized him as heavily there because Kareem Hunt makes a little bit more sense in that role. But as far as the Titans are concerned, the Titans are like walking this razor thin line. If an injury happens, they're fucked. Right? Because if Julio Jones has really the last couple of years has missed time and he's getting older. And if something happens to him and he gets hurt, who's coming in? Are you excited about Josh Reynolds and all of a sudden being your number 2 wide receiver? And so this team, especially on their offensive line, the same thing, very razor thin. They don't have depth there. And so if anything happens, when injuries happen, which happen in the NFL, this team is going to be screwed because they have no depth behind these guys. And so that's my problem with this offense is that one little thing goes wrong, you throw one little wrench in there, and the whole thing's going to collapse. We've seen what happens in Cleveland when other guys go down. Odell Beckham went down halfway through the year. This offense was fine. Actually, in the second half, this offense got way better once he went down. I'm not saying that's not an indictment on Odell. I'm just saying that this team has far more depth, and this offensive line is just way better than what the Titans bring to the table. And so for me, I'm just going to bet on Nick Chubb and his crazy efficiency, being able to kind of put it all together for him to have his kind of monster season that he hasn't had yet, that he's kind of been inching towards the last couple of years, where I think Derrick Henry's more in line probably to regress some, and this offense is just going to regress total. So that's my thing with it. Now, the problem is 109, 105. Generally speaking, Derrick Henry's probably off the board by the time you have to make the decision. But his ADP is falling because he was going around 102, 103. Now he's all the way down to 105. So we're starting to see some people catch on here. But we're talking about full PPR sites with this as well. So I think it's possible these guys converge a little bit closer. But I just prefer those other things with Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that last point about the worry for Nick Chubb, the worry for Derrick Henry, because some people are thinking, at some point he has to fall off, right? He just got 400 touches this last year. He had over 350 the year before. Does he fall off? And I think he's the type of running back that we go back to your team, Priest Holmes, right? If we remember Priest Holmes, he had 3 years of 300 plus touches, getting close to the 400 touches. And he actually didn't do that until his age 28 year. It was his age 28, 29, and 30. And I view Derrick Henry in a really similar light, where Derrick Henry split a lot of time with DeMarco Murray early. He just started getting kind of the majority of the carries in the past 2, maybe 3 seasons, honestly. But I do not think he's not going to be 28 until January of 2022, right? So I don't think we see it quite this year. And so if you're talking about these two backs, you have to bank on that injury happening to Kareem Hunt for Nick Chubb to take over that pass catching work, which he's going to need to catch the volume for Derrick Henry. You're going to have to bank on a Julio Jones injury, which we don't even know if that totally derails the offense, because Julio Jones is obviously new to this offense. But I would agree it wouldn't be great for the offense. So that's the tough part, that I don't want to be the one that banks on injury happening. And then this is just a last minor point, but I think Nick Chubb was obviously super efficient last year. His workload was fantastic. They ran the ball so much. But a little tiny point I wanted to make was, I remember a lot of bad weather games happening in that middle stretch of the season for the Browns, where they basically only threw 22 times per game. It was basically the Raiders, the Texans, the Eagles, or something like that. It was right around their bye week, and they had just 60 to 70 mile an hour winds. They had rain, and they ran the ball a shit ton. They were absolutely going crazy. Now, it's Cleveland. They can obviously have bad weather again, but I think it was an unnormal year where they ran it a lot more due to the conditions, and they threw a lot less than they probably normally would. So again, we're talking about, can he get to 325, 350 carries to keep up with the volume of Derrick Henry? And that's just, I don't think he has that.
Yeah, and we'll see. But again, I'm not trying to say that I think he's going to get hurt. I'm not using injury as any sort of excuse. I hate that argument. We have no idea. Now, all these guys have the possibility of getting hurt. All right, that's the running back position.
Yep.
40% of them are going to bust. That's not the bane of my argument. My argument is, I just don't think their offense is going to be nearly as efficient as they've been, because they've been the most efficient offense the last 2 seasons. And something is eventually going to give, and they're going to regress a little bit. And I just think that this year could definitely be that year that it happens, and that they're forced to throw the ball far more than that they're wanting to. So if this defense takes a step back, kind of look a little bit like Minnesota last year, where Minnesota definitely threw the ball much more than they wanted to because of how bad their defense was. They were forced to throw the ball more. And I think you could be seeing the same thing here in this offense with this team. Because outside of the Texans, the Jaguars are way better. They're not the same pushover team. That you're going to have to be able to keep up with them as well. They're going to be able to score a lot of points. The Colts, Carson Wentz is back, Quentin Nelson's back. Both of them are returning to practice tomorrow, so that offense should be much improved as well. So those aren't really arguments either for, they get to play these teams and do all this stuff, right? So overall, I do think it's close between these two guys, and I think you could make an argument for each side, because neither one of them catch a ton of passes. So that kind of argument goes out the window for them. I just tend to bank on the guy that I think is going to be in the much better offense.
Yeah, there's definitely the case to be made, because we saw both these teams be playoff teams. They both obviously worked through the rushing game. So I'm excited to see, will the Titans' efficiency remain what it was with the addition of Julio? Will the Browns continue to lean on Nick Chubb and a little bit of Kareem Hunt as they have in the past? Kev, I think we have talked this one out. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. We have a lot more throwdowns, more player profiles coming your way, so stay tuned.